Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Investor Insights. I'm Chek Hao, General Manager of iFAST Global Trust, and joining me today are two very special guests, Shun, Associate Director at Finexis Advisory, and Professor Soriano, a Senior Advisor of WBA Group. Today's episode will be a special one, as we'll be diving into family governance and trust, exploring how families can protect both their wealth and their values across generations. We'll talk about why good planning matters, how advisors and trust companies can help, and share practical advice for families looking to secure their legacy. Professor, so many family business owners are familiar with terms trust, but they don't really fully appreciate how a well-structured trust or governance can actually help preserve their legacy and also family relationships throughout the generations. So, in your experience and your course of work, how do you think trust companies and such solutions can help them preserve harmony within the families?
My role is really to pursue governance. But the biggest and very difficult challenge is what next after governance. Yes, we promote family unity, we pursue all the family agreements. But at the end of the day, founders would normally ask me, where's the wealth preservation in all of this ecosystem? That's where we push in the trust concept, where the structures, the tax management, the estate planning, they all are put into one ecosystem where founders will have the confidence now that after all the hard work, wealth will be preserved for as long as 100 years. That's the legacy that they're pursuing. So trust and governance must come hand in hand and create an ecosystem that will develop through the years while the founder is still alive and pursue a very powerful mindset, which is create the preservation plus the legacy side, minus all the drama that happens in a family enterprise.
It sounds like there's a lot to work on, and especially for families who are a bit larger. How do you know that a particular family is ready or not ready to embark on this journey?
The ones that are ready have embarked on a succession journey. They have somehow ordained a family member to assume the mantle of leadership, and they're ready to step back, they're ready to play golf, they're ready to hand over many important decisions to the successor or successors. But those that are not ready are those that are still living in a very sole proprietorship mindset. They're still totally in command. The structures are still informal. They're still, at their old age or ripe age, are still creating many decisions that can also be disruptive. So that's the informal side, and that's where I'm challenged to make sure that they realize the significance of setting the tone, preparing the next generation leadership so that we can embark on a trust model that will again reinforce the concept of wealth preservation.
I mean, for me, I do speak with quite a few family business owners before, and yes, one thing, they still would like to remain in control, but yeah, at the same time, they feel that there is an urgency to make sure that they pass on correctly to the next generation. So for me, I think it is really a very hard conversation to have. It takes time, but I guess people will need to come to the point of realization at some point that I have to look at this properly.
From my perspective as a governance advisor, I would always amplify what happened to my family in the 70s. When my grandfather passed away, it only took 2 years for his wealth to practically disintegrate. And conflicts happened, and my mom was an only child. And yet, a lot of things happened. So again, 2 years, that's why I'm always pressing founders that you've built this business, you've created so much wealth. We need to formalize a structure. We need to set the governance in motion. You need to start, whether you like it or not, a succession process. It doesn't have to be immediate. It can be a 2 to 5 to 10 year process while they still can. And in the end, when they realize that they have started to step back, we put them in the board, make them preside as chair. What's next? This is where the trust now kicks in to make sure that their estate, their programs are in place. So that's the beauty of having governance in place, and putting in the trust and estate and wealth preservation as part of the entire ecosystem.
So what happens when a family sets up a trust structure but neglects family governance? Do conflicts actually arise and or worsen over time?
I've always believed in one very important saying: silence is delaying peace, and silence can also create conflict. It's not something that you just sweep it under the rug. And therefore, having a trust structure with an informal governance or the lack of it can create problems. Conflicts delayed is pretty much just waiting for it to implode. So my take here is we need to set up the governance structure. We need to put in the infrastructure, we need to put in the agreements, we need to define rules, we need to be very specific on those that are active and those that are not active, because take note, they're all shareholders. One may be active but can be overpowered by those that are not active when the founder is not around. So when the leader is up there, still in control, he needs to set the tone. And the key here is putting in the structures from a governance perspective, best practices, getting independent directors in the board. All of these things must be in place. And then the trust system kicks in, which will now make it easy for the next generation to appreciate. After all the agreements that have been signed, this is the next phase, which is pretty much the last part of as I mentioned earlier, the ecosystem.
I will steal that phrase from you, silence delays peace. Yeah, I think that's very typical of Asian culture.
Where, absolutely. Yes.
I've spoken, even my own parents, my grandparents, they just assume, we understand. We understand. Yes. But many a times, I think, sometimes, values across generations are a little bit different. Expectations are a little bit different. So being silent about it doesn't really help. Even you have the proper governance paperwork in place, but you don't communicate.
Absolutely. The communication is by far the cheapest risk mitigation technique in governance. Just communicate, no matter how difficult the conversations are. That is where we normally come in. We be the unemotional, more objective third party that the family trusts. And then we come in to somehow provide them a better route instead of the usual emotion, the drama that we typically find in Netflix, all of these things. So that's our role. And only then can we now pursue wealth preservation. Only then we can now discuss trust. Otherwise, like in your question, if governance is not in place, they will end up even contesting the trust.
Exactly.
And that's going to be a big problem for many. I've had a handful of clients where after the founder passed away, they will contest the trust arrangement that the father made them sign. Yeah. That's really our advocacy. Let's push governance first, then move on to trust. They're kissing cousins.
Of course. So now let's bring this to a real life advisory practice.
Yes.
For Wei Shun, when the client passes on, what instructions do you usually receive from the families, to help them transit?
Generally, founders will always evolve around these three major principles. First of all, capital protection. Secondly, we must have perpetual cash flow to fund the trust. Last but not least will be wealth accumulation and growth. Clients view trust as a protection vehicle, so it needs fuel and electricity to be well run. Therefore, we need to create stable, lasting investment plans that funds the trust perpetually. So a balanced approach to achieve stable returns and yet capital protection. Most importantly, and besides making money from business activities, the family's wealth continue to grow.
The wealth is the fuel. So in case if the business, need liquidity and all that, there's always a certain pot that they can always step on.
Essentially, the founders or the beneficiaries, the trust, do not need to liquidate or touch the business reserves to pay for something else that could have been planned for already.
So essentially building a war chest in case things happen beyond our control.
So from what Wei Shun answered, I'd like to dovetail on how the process works. Most, if not many business owners are so fixated in their operating companies. That's where the source of their wealth is. What we're advocating is to create another avenue to grow the wealth without really disturbing the existing operating wealth. And that particular wealth can be tapped. Should there be external events? Should there be even conflict within the family members? There is this wealth that will continue to grow, not just preserve, and will provide intervention in the event many issues will happen, both internally and externally. That is the essence of our advocacy. Not just grow your operating wealth, but grow wealth outside so that it will create a balance, and both avenues of wealth can eventually benefit the family over the long haul.
So what are the first concerns that family members raise when the decision maker passes on, and what solutions do you have in place to help them transit across this phase?
Okay, to answer the first part, family members' immediate concerns will be, do we even have the legal rights to operate the business? So in Singapore, a letter of administration typically takes 4 to 6 months. If silent delays peace, it's going to take even longer. Then besides lawyer fees, some countries you have your estate duty and inheritance tax. Family members will really need to look at their bank accounts. Do we have the cash to pay these taxes and duties before we can inherit the legal rights to operate the business? So cash is king. Timely injection of cash flow will be a lifeline right now. For the company, they will think externally, will my competitors launch their attack on us? Or will we lose key contracts, because a lot of contracts are given based on founder relationship. A lot of handshaking contracts are given because founders are there. Internally, will there be a power struggle amongst the key management? And will the employees' morale be shaken and start to leave because founders are not there anymore? Last but not least is, what are the critical assets, contracts and banking facilities tied to the founders? Will the creditors start knocking at our door? And some of the question will be even, can my children or grandchildren even complete their education? Solutions that I will implement: good old trustee insurance, guaranteed multiple for cash flows. Some owners will say, I will just, because most of them they will have real estate, I will just sell a piece of my land or a building. However, they will not be around to realize that the competitors or the buyers are not as friendly as before. So there's a Chinese saying, begging yourself is easier than begging others. So I always tell my clients, you need to save yourself first. Insurance will allow generations to keep their hard-earned assets. So secondly will be, Prof just now mentioned, global economy is increasingly volatile, influenced with geopolitical tensions. You have your fluctuating interest rate, you even have climate changes. So long-lasting strategies may no longer be as effective as market cycles become shorter and unpredictable. Investment landscape is constantly evolving. We should use technology to aid our investment decision. So thankfully, to our relief, iFAST has a unique strategy, the trigger point strategy. It's a logic-based investment strategy, a discretionary portfolio management system. So it uses a evidence-based systematic approach that sets a safe entry and exit point. It's rational, logical, and methodical. So by emphasizing consistency, transparency, it will help clients to build trust and confidence to ensure that they stay focused on their long-term goals.
I guess there's a lot of focus on wealth when it comes to passing on. So how do governance framework actually do a bit more in terms of passing on values, in terms of passing on cultures, and making sure that everybody breathe the same air across generations?
So in our governance journey, there's one very important element that money can buy: shared values. Shared values that will translate to family unity. And the second one is alignment, that we're all in this together. We understand what our founder wants but may not be able to express from an Asian perspective. Number 3, defining their specific roles. It doesn't have to be a mandate that all of you will be working, but the moment you have made a choice, whether to work or not, the roles must be very well defined. If you sit in the board, you need to understand board governance. So our ecosystem focuses on three main systems. One is the family governance system. The most difficult, the family governance system highlights a very powerful tool that many may not be able to appreciate. We uncover hidden, undisclosed issues that could actually date back to their childhood. When siblings were probably fighting, it goes to the board. I've had many cases where one sibling would say, because you pushed me, I fell and I broke my limb. And therefore, I will say no to your CapEx proposal.
It's like an emotional ransom kind of thing.
It's absolutely. And then that sibling would rally other siblings. The older brother has been bullying us when we were young. And it comes out in the board, and the founder will just be there quiet because he's likely to be quite old and frail. We come in. That's the family governance system that must be addressed. When I say shared values, translates to unity, and we can all move forward and scale the business. Then the second system would be what we call business governance. When you come in as a family member, you come in with a mindset that I am unconditionally loved. So whether I perform or not, I get to stay in the business, I get my perks, and it creates entitlement. There are no accountabilities. We come in to tell the family member, the moment you move from family to business, the bets are off. The roles must prevail because you're here to perform. So your last name may not necessarily be your birthright because you now have to be accountable with certain KPIs. Once that's addressed, which is really a process, we now move to wealth preservation. We call it ownership governance. We make them responsible. We make them realize the fiduciary duty of each and every family member that happens to be a shareholder or a director of the board. Those three are tied together. We create the family charter. We create the shareholders. For as long as those three systems are aligned, we now head towards the most important part. Are we going to preserve the wealth? Are we aspiring for 100 years? Are we looking at a fellow business owner that's pushing for 100 years now? Should we be? We're almost 50 years. Should we give it a try? So in all of these things, we handhold them, and inevitably there's that realization. With the shareholders agreement, with the constitution, with asking them sensitive questions whether they would want in-laws to own shares, we now embark on this trust journey, because that's where the litmus test for many families. Are we preserving the wealth? Are we just going to just distribute the wealth? All of these things now come into the picture.
So Wei Shun, what risks do families face when they delay their legacy planning until a crisis occurs?
Sometimes when it is too late, it can be a situation, it's like you throw a cat into a pigeon nest, it's a pigeon cage. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess. It will create a lot of uncertainty, perfect recipe for confusion, conflict, finally cost. These 3 C's that I always tell my clients. Like, the more you delay, the longer you delay, it's going to be more costly. The problem is going to be even bigger and messier to untangle the mess.
So Professor, you have collaborated with a lot of trust companies, licensed financial advisors to deliver a holistic approach for your clients' business and family assets. So can you share an example of how this integrated approach has helped them align their values, their wealth, and also their long-term legacy goals?
I can first share with you my first 10 years doing governance work was a very difficult one. Many business owners have their own preferred service providers, and it was a nightmare for me from a governance perspective. Each service provider, from the asset managers to trust companies to to tax experts. They all have their own set of ideas. It is not aligned to what we do in governance. So what happens next? A hodgepodge of so many ideas until we finally said, perhaps it's time to integrate all of these services. It doesn't matter if your tax advisor will come from your end. The key here is the overarching cheerleader and conductor would come from my office, which is family governance. That was many, many years ago. Now I'm happy to say that the integration is now bearing fruit. We're getting all the providers, all the experts in one page. We ride one bus and we go to the right destination. So it's fully integrated, it's part of the ecosystem, and those that are not aligned, they have to leave the bus. So that's the concept of the successes we've had through the years. But it was a very painful and difficult challenge many, many years ago. So finally, we all agreed. The founders have realized the importance of getting everyone, because you may have done your part as a tax expert and tax mitigated the whole process. But at the end of the day, is the family united? Are they harmonious, or they just simply said, okay, we'll get it because that's what Papa said? So our role is to question, challenge, and align with the other consultants to come up with the right mix of wealth preservation, asset management ideas, and then culminate it with hard documents that will make sure it's going to protect the family for as long as it takes.
So which means we not only want to get the family members to work closely together, the service providers also have to sing the same song together. Yeah. Some families have concern that they want a place that's international enough to be able to say that we own this asset in this country legally. So Singapore is a place that recognizes law is very strong. They recognize ownership and proper documentation. So in a way, it will lead to that as well. I think most importantly is to, number one, you have so many places, you have so many assets in so many places. Where would you want to choose a hub, to do this kind of thing, I guess. But personally, in your own experience, how do people with global assets, do they have a few regional hubs, or do they centralize, or?
Especially for families that have assets spread across, we need to make sure there is one haven for low risk, highly regulated, so that the wealth preserve is really preserved. In my experience handling many families in emerging economies, unfortunately, after doing so much research for the last 7 years, we've come to the conclusion that only a handful of advanced economies can offer quality of life, wonderful healthcare, asset protection, and then on the side, wealth preserve. So our mandate is really, and I think it's a convenient way also of making us consultants to slowly step back from the grind, where just a good example where, for instance, a family would like to preserve their wealth in Singapore. We encourage the wealth providers, the consultants, the trust providers to consider investing in Singapore companies. My personal interest is to get the next generation, family members, to understand global best practices by making them sit in the boards in Singapore where their families may have equity. It cuts short my mentoring.
That's true.
Because yes, they're happy, they have put in their wealth here, but they need to be here as well. At the very least, to secure their equity in companies they are somehow compelled to sit in the board, and they now follow best practices in a highly regulated, business environment. So that's what we would want to do and put them all together. That's my advocacy for the last 5 years, getting them to consider Singapore as a haven to preserve the wealth and get to embrace best practices and hopefully scale their businesses here to cover the region instead of just putting their eggs in one particular country. So that's really what I am pushing. It's a full integration of all the necessary experts, specialists, and offshore the wealth here, grow the business in their home country, but scale the wealth here by buying more businesses, and perhaps their children can have a shortcut to global best practices.
So what advice would you give to founders who are very hesitant to start this process?
The advice that I'll give to the founders is to reduce these 3 big C's: confusion, conflict, and cost. The longer you hesitate, the bigger these 3 big C's will be.
When is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago? When is the next best time? Some say it's today. My take is the day before yesterday. Start the process. Founders, while they still can, must start the process. It's definitely challenging, it's definitely difficult, but that's precisely what governance is all about. Anticipating a predictable event like death, the what ifs. These are also predictable. So while the founders can still set the tone, anticipate a future event, they must define it. Otherwise, circumstances will dictate the outcome of their family business, their legacy. And as a footnote, we are merely borrowing this business from our grandchildren. That's the way to do it. And founders must recognize the process is not something we can create tomorrow. This is the best time to do it.
Very good point, Prof. We don't know what we don't know. Speak to an advisor to let the advisor uncover the true reason for hesitation.
It's very important to find out that if your hesitation do have a certain grounding, then it's always best to work with the advisor early to quickly address it and move on the legacy process. So thank you, Shun and Professor, for coming here today to share your insights on family governance and how to make sure that you embark on the right journey with the right people. So it's not just about protecting wealth, it's also about keeping family relationships strong and passing on values to the next generation. If you'd like to learn more about setting up a trust and family governance, visit iFAST Global Trust at our website. Thanks for tuning in to this special episode, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.